Hi everyone, I'm Dermot Brady. Some of you will know me. This recording really is an update for SW4014 on the job learning. Following the submission and marking of the first portfolios, I'm hoping that this little presentation will be of some value to apprentices, mentors and SRAs. So the purpose really is to go through some feedback from markers, feedback from the practice assessment panel, a little bit more about that later on, thinking about reviewing progress to date, both formally and informally, and the second portfolio requirements. There is a little document that will come with this presentation. It's kind of more detailed notes about the feedback we have received. And again, I hope that will be useful to you when preparing your second portfolio. So as we know, everybody passed the portfolio, yay! Well done you, some really good work and some exceptional work, I have to say. So we know the portfolio elements, confidentiality statement, and so on and so forth, with two unique bits in portfolio one, your journey into social work, where people start to think about their career progression, their values, their beliefs, why they chose social work, and agency description, which is a little bit more focused on policies and procedures and things of that nature. Your second portfolio will not include those elements, but it will include all the other elements that we see listed here. We do module evaluation questionnaires on a regular basis. These are very positive. Have the opportunity to compare these to feedback from other modules. So we see mainly green, and one person there was a bit undecided about the opportunity for on-campus learning for this module. Entirely understandable, but some very positive responses, but we should bear in mind that there was just 5 people responded, so it meets the criteria for generating these kind of results, but we have to be a little bit cautious about the results. Yes, that's, I think, quite enough for that slide. Really, the current issues, unsurprisingly, are about managing the learning and work. This is what we hear from apprentices. Sometimes that's quite a struggle, making a transition to being a learner 4 days a week, trying to manage caseloads or the amount of work that you have to do. And at this stage, we're thinking about what additional input is needed. What areas for development might you usefully focus on? And of course, that's entirely to be expected at this very early stage of your course. Of course, people will be thinking about the portfolio to come and perhaps the vivas, and we'll deal with that in more detail later on in the presentation. We will talk about guided independent study, particularly over the summer period, suggested reading, the next academic year, and perhaps even the next cohort. So key dates for the course. Transitions into social work submitted in November, everybody passed that. Foundational skills and knowledge for practice, again, submitted in January and everybody passed. And you have done the first half of 4013, Introduction to Law, Policy and Ethics for Practice. And everybody passed the online law exam, which is often quite anxiety provoking. So it's very pleasing to see that everybody passed that. And you'll be preparing for your group presentations, which will be due in May. For on the job learning, portfolio 1, everybody's passed that. That's worth 40% of the total grade for that module. Portfolio 2 is worth the same amount, but is due in June. And the Viva, again, due in June and is 20% of the total. So just a little more detail on that. So direct observation 2 will be coming up. That will usually be done by the mentor in the workplace. It's a formative assignment. Formative simply means that it's a draft, that you will get feedback on that. It contributes or is part of the summative or graded assessment that you will then submit in June. I would advise you in every opportunity you can submit formative work and get feedback. So direct observation 2, feedback by the 16th of May. And for the critical reflection on learning 2, slightly longer piece of work this time, the same date for formative feedback, and I would strongly advise you to take up that opportunity. You should be updating your learning needs and opportunities and discuss and finalize that with your mentor and the SRA before the portfolio submission. I think usually I see that as a kind of rolling project, because emerging needs become kind of self-evident as it goes on, as do emerging opportunities. You kind of think, oh, I did that. I wonder, what else might I do to support that? So obviously not just about things like shadowing or observing other practice, or seeing your workers or more experienced people perhaps. It could also be training events, but perhaps taking on occasion, not always the case, more complex pieces of work that you're aware of within your team, but you haven't had the opportunity to try out yet. So the portfolio 2, the summative graded submission, is due on the 6th of June. If you are experiencing any difficulties and you think you might have any problems with submitting, the earlier you speak to your mentor and SRA or course tutor, the better. So flag it up early if you feel it's going to be a problem. The Viva, sometimes people get a little bit worried about that, but it's essentially, it's a short presentation which you will do online on the morning of the 13th of June. Again, if you experience or are likely to experience any problems with that date, the sooner you let us know, the better. Vivas are very difficult to rearrange. They're a live exercise, and we try to do them all on the same day. So please do talk to us if you anticipate any problems with that. Vivas, even though you might have a bit of anxiety about them, they're actually an opportunity to celebrate your progress over the year. And we approach them with that kind of idea in mind, and perhaps they're not quite so anxiety provoking. Tripartite reviews, these are essential but not graded, and there's 3 a year. So let's say a little bit about those. We were not entirely expecting these in the way that they've occurred, nor were we entirely expecting Aptem, the system, which you all have to use. So you're the first cohorts that will be using Aptem throughout your course, and because of the way it was implemented, rolled out, and our own learning about it, they've tended to be a little bit clustered in a way that isn't entirely perfect, to say the least. But we will definitely endeavour to spread these out in a more sensible fashion next year. But as with anything like this, again, your mindset and how you approach them makes a big difference, so we can use them as positive opportunities to review progress. There's a balance to be struck here with the mentoring agreement, which contains information that the tripartite does not, but I feel like we are getting kind of more used and more adept, if you will, at using these in a positive manner. Strange sections, So really essential for compliance and payment. So they're part of the compliance regime that those who pay for courses require us to do. So there is, it's not an optional extra, it absolutely has to be done. Bearing in mind that, the emphasis on them is generally on support and progress. Are you getting what you need from your employer and from the university? And there's opportunities, obviously, for employers, apprentices, and university staff to make comments on that. Sometimes people find these sections on safeguarding, prevent, British values, equality, diversity, and health and safety a little bit bemusing. They kind of go, oh, sorry. Well, if you kind of think of the broader context in which apprenticeships occur, there will be a lot of people for whom these issues are really not things that are kind of addressed in the workplace at all. That safeguarding, if you were doing an engineering apprenticeship, might not be something that is really coming to the top of your agenda, or in fact, be something that you know anything about at all. So bear in mind that the compliance arrangements are based on all apprenticeships, not just on social work apprenticeships. British values is a very interesting little one. I'll put a little link in there and you can see where this comes from, essentially from 2014 British government efforts to talk about British values. You know, British values, are they unique values? Maybe you could use that as an opportunity for a little bit of reflection and debate about where these ideas come from and what their importance might be. Prevent, most of you will know about at this stage. And since equality and diversity is, and I hope you experience it this way, a central and core part of our course rather than an optional extra, I'm hoping that that will not be too difficult for you to fill in. And in any event, I feel your values as trainee social work professionals kind of make that kind of something that's closer to your heart than it might be in other apprenticeships. Health and safety, perhaps is self-explanatory, but for you it might be things about am I aware of, for example, arrangements for home visiting, lone working, things of that nature. So for all of these, think of the context that you're working in and what you can usefully or reasonably say about those things. A brief note about the PCF level. We are now in first placement level. RGP is a relatively straightforward level, and we do expect you at Portfolio 1 to be able to meet that relatively easily because you are actually working in the profession in various different ways. This level will extend all the way to December 22, and from the general guidance about this, you can see that it talks about predominantly less complex situations, supervision and support, and demonstrated capacity to work with people in situations where there may not be simple, clear-cut solutions. I noticed a typo there. I've looked at this presentation about 15 times and I still didn't get the typo. A bit of a little lesson there in close proofreading, which in actual fact is one of the things I comment on in the extended notes that go with this. And turns out I didn't follow my own advice. So the way the PCF and IATE levels across the whole course pan out is a bit like this. Now, I'm not going to go through it in detail. The slide is there as much for information as anything else. But it kind of gives you a rough overview of how the PCF levels work. And of course, now we're bringing in IATE. It's not without challenges. IAT and PCF do not necessarily map all that easily. There is no sector guidance in this at the moment, but I am told that that is coming along shortly. So in any event, we made our own kind of little mapping document that might help you when you're doing both your learning opportunities and your index of evidence. It'll be in the Canvas document folder. If it isn't in there now today, it'll be in there shortly. If you can follow the link down there, you'll see a page that looks like this, only with a couple of extra little boxes saying that they're currently reviewing and updating it. So that's the kind of broad brushstrokes. When we think about review, what do we mean by review? Well, it's an opportunity to take stock and consider various elements of your on-the-job learning and perhaps to plan for the remaining part of the year and for Portfolio 2. So in general, celebrate success and achievement. Everyone is progressing so far. We've all got things to learn. Surprise, surprise. Learning is a lifelong endeavor, not something that is just kind of happens within the brackets of an academic course. The external examiner and other people have commented that some people are working at level 7, which is a master's level, which is fantastic, but it is not our expectation. As Jacqueline often says, there's no need to go tap dancing on the moon. Slowly but surely and steady progress really is what we're looking for. Now, though, is the time to think about your learning opportunities between now and December 2022. And it'll become a little bit clearer, I hope. You'll be preparing for your CLE at the start of the next calendar year. So there's a lot goes into that. I won't give too much detail about it here, only to flag it up a little bit. But are the learning opportunities what you need right now? Essentially, really, it's collaborative endeavor. the apprentice mentor and SRA need to be working together to kind of plan and make sure these things are in place. So we have a practice assessment panel. So they looked at a sample of portfolios at the end of February, and I've just had the feedback notes, extremely detailed. So I've done a kind of a synopsis of those with feedback from other places that you can actually study in a little bit more detail, but I'm not going to go through in as much detail today. So they were generally good, yeah. So starting off good and some exceptional work, which is nice to see. There's a little bit about referencing and linking theory to practice. At this stage of your course, you know, that's a work in progress. So you'll get used to referencing your opinions, because essentially really references move your opinion up to opinion with evidence, if you see what I mean. And you'll start to link theory to practice in a bit more kind of comprehensive sort of way. And I expect that your mentor and SRA will help you with that. And of course, your in-class learning is something that informs your practice in the workplace, but you're also bringing that learning back into the classroom. And we see these things as a kind of a loop like this, like a kind of a virtuous kind of figure eight, where the two things are informing each other. Just a little thing, you know, actually, signatures, don't type in your name, but there are a range of small little points like that that, you know, I'd put it this way. If it's a 1% deal and you can improve your work by 1%, I would take the 1%. So you'll see in the more detailed notes some suggestions about things like signatures and some other elements of the portfolios like that. There are clear reflective elements in your kind of written work, and they are developing. So you'll be expected to build on them over the next 2.5 or so years, and I'm sure that is exactly what you're going to do. Again, as I said, more detailed handout to follow. Now, when we're reviewing progress, obviously the tripartite agreement might be useful here, but it doesn't happen in isolation. So it could be good in terms of support you're getting. You might be able to kind of record any issues where there's some struggles in the workplace and perhaps plan for that. But it needs to be in tandem with the mentoring agreement, where the more detailed, how to say, index of evidence is, and also, of course, just some notes about yourself and your mentor getting to know each other and deciding how you will work together. What you must keep going on a regular basis and do it like housework. Little and often is better than trying to fit everything at the end, which generally turns out to be a bit of a nightmare. So keep your index of evidence going. Try to record it in such a way that you don't just state what the activity was. Try to put in a line or so, and it only needs to be that much, about what you learned from that experience. If you get into the habit of doing that now, it becomes much easier to see if you have the depth and breadth of evidence that's required by the time that you come to the end of your course. When we're thinking about exemplars, we do need permission to share exemplars. I don't think that the next cohort would have much of a problem with that. They've been very generous with their permissions for some exemplar work so far. But do remember that you're now using a new index. That index will carry you through till the end of the calendar year. In other words, to December 2022, because it also has the IATE standards. Again, that'll take you a little while to get used to, but once you get into the swing of it, I really do not see that there would be much in the way of problems. Here are some questions to consider at this stage of your course. Are the learning opportunities sufficient, and are you able to access them? Is the role you're currently in, for example, allowing you to kind of develop your practice a little bit more? Do you get enough face-to-face contact with people with lived experience that you can develop your skills further? Does your workload allow sufficient time to do an apprenticeship? So is your caseload at 80% or less? Is there some boundaries around how much more work you might be expected to take on? Now, we don't tell employers what to do in terms of allocating work, but the mentor and the SRA do have a duty of care to you to make sure that you have the time and space for learning. So we're there perhaps to advocate on your behalf, and I'm sure that you can advocate on your own behalf, but trying to kind of address those issues now before perhaps at a later stage it becomes more difficult to actually either address or to do other things about. Update the learning opportunities, always a good idea. Add some if necessary. Usually, for example, additional learning opportunities are suggested by the direct observations. So trying to keep these documents as live things rather than things just a tick box. Think about them as something that helps and guides you in your practice development rather than tasks that must be completed. A bit of both, of course, but let's not forget the purposes of the document rather than the function and functionality of them. So pay close attention to learning opportunities and keep your index of evidence up to date. A little bit of repetition there for you. So assignment instructions. So let's think about the actual portfolio. Let's just briefly go back to that again. Transitions done, way. Foundational skills and knowledge for practice, yay. Introduction to law, policy and ethics, etc. Generally positive noises. And portfolio 1 done, 6th of June, portfolio 2, 13th of June, 5, as we kind of noticed or noted earlier. So the critical reflection is one of the more important things here. So at this stage now, we're expecting a much longer document, about 1,000 words. There is guidance on Canvas and there will be a recorded session later on in the year. As I said previously, you don't have to do agency description or my journey into social work here. So some of the most important elements are, in actual fact, direct observation, mentoring agreement, and critical reflection on learning. So when you're thinking about critical reflection on learning, think about, are there critical learning events for you during the last year? Things that were really important that kind of made you see things in a different way. What really made a difference to your learning? You may wish to do a kind of overarching narrative and say what kind of general changes were involved. I'd advise you, if you can at all, try not to write about the observation and reflect further on that. Even though there's a certain amount of leeway, I think for your own learning, standing back and thinking about the really important things for you, either very specifically or more generally, you probably get more value out of the exercise that way. It might be work with a person with lived experience. It could be off-the-job learning, in other words, something that happens in the classroom. You're expected to align it with the PCF and IATE. A little bit too much detail here. So when we do the recorded session later on in the year, we'll cover those things in more detail. Definitely, and I cannot stress this enough, take advantage of formative feedback. Up to the 16th of May, you know, feedback drives performance and all those kind of cliches that we hear. The thing about cliches is there's an element of truth in them. Positive feedback can help you just reframe, change things, make little changes. Sometimes that might be only 1 or 2% of changes. But again, as I said earlier, I'll take the 1 or 2%. Thank you very much. I have to do a presentation, Dermot. What are you making me do this for? Well, it's an opportunity to summarize your learning over the year. It's only 10 minutes. You will get a ton of guidance about how to do this. And you can actually practice it beforehand. But really, we see it as an opportunity to celebrate. And that's what it felt like last year when we were doing them. You could see people have that opportunity to have that overview and to kind of present it back to their peers. It could be small groups online, no more than about 6 people in each online group, thereabouts. And it'll be the morning, as I said, on the 13th of June. Again, any amount of guidance to come out on this, and I'll come into class and we can talk about it a little bit more. Looking forward, well, tripartite reviews now are just being done, and unfortunately they're a bit scrunched and bunched. We'll do that better next year, but you may have as many as 2 more to do before the end of the year. Well, now that we know what to do, perhaps it'll be a bit easier, but they do have to be done. Probably a good idea to meet up with a mentor in the SRA in May to ensure everything is okay with portfolio. Just have a chance to touch base, do a little bit of problem solving if that's required. Maybe again meet at the end of June. Anticipate summer activities, more on that in a minute. But remember, Friday continues to be a university day, but it is self-directed learning. The 80-20 split covers the whole year. So if your manager is telling you that they suddenly want you back in the office on the Friday, feel free to tell them that that is not how the course is organized. From June to September, Fridays are self-guided learning. We will give you some suggestions about how to make use of that time. We'll make reading suggestions, accessing other resources and things of that nature, but it is your time. We do, of course, expect you to take leave, and there is enough leeway built within our calculations on that 80-20 split for you to take leave. We will also, as we did last year, survey all stakeholders at the end of the year. That includes you, employer reps, mentors, SRAs, and then we kind of provide that feedback to everybody at a later stage. Contrasting learning experience is something that's going to come up next year. So this is just a little heads up about it. It's a 70-day experience from December for those who are working part-time, or early January for full-timers. There was a task and finish group with employers to confirm arrangements last year. And, we have very clear outlines about how everything's supposed to be done. But we are now learning from the actual experience. They're providing a lot of learning for the apprentices, and they're getting a completely different perspective, probably on a new part of their agencies that they didn't know much about. And there's also a lot of learning for us as a course team, and indeed for the employers. So our planning for this will begin early in the academic new year, meaning September. So one of the things we definitely have learned is the sooner we start planning, the better, really. So we don't need to say too much about that, but that will be one of the major things in the next academic year. After that, it'll be the next cohort. I wonder, would some of you consider coming in and talking to the next cohort? The recruitment is very healthy at the moment, it would appear. And maybe you come along and talk to them and tell them about your experience. You are closer to the learning than anybody else. You will think about things that are important for those students because you've been sitting in the same desk. So I look forward to seeing you in one of those early classes in the new year, and hopefully you'll take up that offer or invitation, if you will. Final words. Really well done with the first portfolio. Excellent work. It's great to see that everybody's progressing onwards and upwards. And thank you very much for your time.